This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Reins through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Niko leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
What a win! Let's see how the Sunday, bro.
Porque se cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take the Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, and of course, our Sounder at Heart subscribers. I am Jeremiah Shan, joining you today in a sort of special episode. I got Niko Moreno here. We are recording at Longacres, Sounders FC Center at Longacres. That's what I'm going to still call it. Niko, how are you doing?
It's easier, absolutely. Thank you for bringing me on. It is Providence in Swedish Clubhouse and Sporting something else.
Yeah,
I almost got it. There's something else. So it's way too long. It's way too complicated, but thank you for having me on. I think it's a good spot in the season to do so. There's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
Some that have already been, officialized, some that are still in the works. So, man, I love it.
Yeah, so, some of the things that we're probably going to do today, talk about Jackson Reagan's new contract, talk a little bit about Brian Schmetzer's future, and sort of get into the outlook of the Sounders season. They're heading down into a very important stretch run where they play 4 games against 4 likely playoff teams, 4 teams who they're competing with in terms of seeding. We just ran a story on Sounder at Heart about the projections and where each team might finish, so it comes at a good time. We aren't there yet, but let's get into the newsy bit first. Jackson Reagan, just his contract was announced. He's going to be with the Sounders guaranteed through 2020, or he's under contract at least through 2027 with the club option for 2028. We don't know the amount. It sounded like, actually, listening to Jackson's comments, it sounds like maybe he ended up getting a bit more than I had heard the Sounders were wanting to pay, because he sort of alluded to the idea that there was a gap in what the Sounders were offering and what he and his representation felt like he was worth. But we don't know the answer to that, so we don't need to get too much into it. But just broadly speaking, what do you think of the Sounders? He's a 26-year-old center back. He's basically signed for the next 4 seasons, so through his age 30 season. Seems like a solid move for locking him up.
It is a solid move, and it's something that the club needed to do.
Yeah.
I think what would make this, whether it was a great signing or a good signing, because either way you needed it, because of everything you just said, the frame, the size, the IQ, the technical ability. We asked him about being a fantastic passer out of the back. He's the best passing center back, obviously, in the Sounders. He has to be up there MLS league-wide, in my opinion.
I think it's fair to say, most of the metrics rate him as the best passer, maybe of all outfield players, but certainly of center backs. And, you don't necessarily see it on a play-by-play basis. It's not like he's out there pinging dimes, but he's just consistently breaking lines almost every time he passes forward.
Absolutely. And that ability for him to, because he has had some mistakes and he has had some problems.
For sure.
And his ability to just get through that, get over that, let's clear that mind and move forward is important. However, what I will say is that I saw your tweet about it being 600 to 700, but maybe if you're saying that there's a possibility that is more than 7, that's where I start to have a little bit of whether it's just good or very good, because he was making a lot less. And
making under about $100,000.
Exactly,
yeah.
right? So in my mind, I didn't think that you can go over 500, just in the sense of like setting a precedent for what's ahead for the team. How much can I bump myself up from my very first offer or the first time that I get a salary upgrade? So that part is something that I would still like to see.
Yeah.
And that would definitely allow me to give it a grade. That said, I don't want to take anything away from the defender as a whole. He's someone that I feel like has taken that position from a guy like Javier Arriaga that was supposed to be the guy. Now, the more we see the Javier Arriaga move, the more we think that it was perfectly done. And it should have probably been
Maybe
done
not
a little.
perfectly done, but it was definitely they got out at the right time.
That's right. Maybe it could have been even earlier, right? So because of that, because of the sense of the team and what he's been able to bring in, the partnership with Yeimar, I feel like it's a very good one. I think they feed off each other very well. So because of that, I think it is a good move.
And I would imagine from a amount perspective, you can't let him get to Yeimar level. I don't think.
No.
Because Yeimar is a 2-time Defender of the Year finalist. I think he is what makes Jackson Reagan work. Frankly.
Absolutely.
You can afford to have a Jackson Reagan on the field when you have a Yeimar next to him, because for all the mistakes that Jackson might make, you have a Yeimar who's capable of covering up for them. So I think he is that from a pay perspective, I would hope that, and I would imagine the Sounders use this argument as well, which is, look, we have this guy already under contract who's proven on levels that Jackson is not yet. So,
and someone who took a little bit to get to where he's at. I mean, let's not forget that he came in for a packet of gum and some Chips Ahoy. I mean, it was literally a very good find by the Sounders. I think he was like a 290 or something.
He was
really low initially. So when I look at that and I say, hey, look, Yeimar has been the best defender since 2020 for this club statistically.
And maybe you could
in MLS. Yeah,
I think you can make the argument that if you take his performance, this is Yeimar that we're talking about here. If you take his collective performance from 2020 to now, I think you can make a pretty valid argument that he has been the most consistent.
I agree.
And maybe the best defender in a year in, year out basis. And I think the only person that even comes close is probably like a Walker Zimmerman, and this is a guy who's on a DP contract.
Yeah, and on $1 million contract, absolutely. $1 million plus, 1.7, right? Not even guys over the last 4 years like Robinson for Atlanta and now Cincinnati. He hasn't had that type of last 4 years.
No,
I mean, these are guys that were, thinking they were like the top of the chain. So
there's every year you see center backs especially have one great year where all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, this is the best center back in the league.
Mm-hmm.
You never hear about him again.
Nope.
I mean, like, I don't need to get into who all those players are, but it's a thing that happens a lot. And the Yeimar has been so consistent is part of why I think it makes it very easy to say, look, this is your ceiling for what we're willing to pay right now. And this is what we have. And it's not like Yeimar signed a long time ago. It was only a couple years ago. So his contract's relatively new.
And I did ask Jackson about it because in MLS, it's funny because you could tell what everybody's at, and that'll happen in January. He said he didn't care, he didn't mind.
Right, the salary thing.
The salary, he just came out, right?
That's right.
So
he just luckily missed that.
He just luckily missed that. But those are conversations that are had in locker rooms, man.
Sure.
So that's why I asked. He very well just, went to the side on that and just didn't think much about it. But it's something that will come up.
Yeah, and and to sort of get to the roster building aspect of this, I do think getting him under contract was pretty important because it's not a foregone conclusion that you can go out and find a starting caliber player, even at that amount. I mean, you look at on our roster, Nathan is here. He's on $500,000, and I think it's a testament to Jackson Reagan that his starting spot has really never been in question. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we've seen enough of Nathan to say, oh, well, he's just been bad. He may have been, like, I think he's probably been okay. but there's been no opening really for him to get through. And to the degree that he had an opening was at the beginning of the year when he was really competing with Arriaga, and he wasn't able to break through then, mainly because he was hurt. But, my point being that that's the kind of player, if you're going out into the open market and you're looking at somewhere in the $500 to $1 million range, it's a lot of players like Nate. You're just as likely to find a player like Nathan as you are to find a player like Yamar, who still at this point is probably still a pretty good bargain. But I think getting him point being, signing him was an important piece to building the puzzle as we look into 2025, which we'll talk a little bit more about later in the show. The other question that I thought was really good that Jada Evans from the Seattle Times brought up today, she sort of pressed Brian on his contract situation. He is going to be out of contract at the end of the year. We've been talking about this on our show a bit. You asked him about it on Monday.
Yes.
And at the time, he almost blew you off completely.
Yeah.
Today, he was clearly in a better mood. Maybe they're related. We don't know. But he was willing to go a little bit more out on the limb and say he was confident something would get worked out, I think is maybe the exact quote. How did you read that answer?
Well, look, quite honestly, I wasn't sure if it was just because Jada asked it or if it was that he was in a better mood today. On Monday, he wanted nothing to do with us. He really wanted to get back to the clubhouse. Christian talked for a little bit and he was not happy about that. So maybe that has something to do with it. But usually I think that he would rather stab himself with the pen he's clicking rather than answer my questions. So, whether it was Jada asking or not, the reality was that he did give us a little more. And it does provide us a little bit of room for speculation in that did something happen because of your mood, because of the way you're answering. He went into depth a little bit. He even answered me about the fact that the team has lost a protagonist role within MLS, within Western Conference over the last 2 years. He alluded to the fact that this team was a shot away, that Jordan Moore's opportunity against LAFC to get farther into the playoffs. And he said, we'll have this conversation later down the road when we go to the playoffs and we'll see how far we get. So part of me would like to think that maybe there's still conversations to be had and that he is, positive that something will get resolved. But his demeanor was very telling today. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to find out if something actually did happen. But what I thought was, to me, where it comes down to is this, is if you know who you want to hire instead, I think this is why you make that decision, right? If you say, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just say the Sounders have decided that they want Gonzo Pineda to be their next head coach specifically.
Which the move that would make sense.
Which would make sense in a lot of ways. And he's available right now. And so you don't know when that's going to happen again. So if you want him, this is the time to get him. Whether or not you think, and that's not a commentary on Brian at all. That's just a commentary on, we know for the long-term future of this team, this is the coach that we want. So you have to go ahead and do that. Now, if you don't know who that person is, whether it's Gonzo Pineda or somebody else, if you don't know exactly the direction that you want to go, I don't think, regardless of how and this is why I don't necessarily think how this team finishes plays into, I suppose if they win MLS Cup, it makes it very easy to just be like, no, Brian, you're coming back.
Sure,
right?
Of course.
But I don't really think that the Sounders are waiting to see how the season goes to decide on Brian's future. I think, because I don't think they have any interest in going into the open market and just say, bring us your candidates. We want to interview 10 guys and then go from there. No, I think if that's what you're looking at, I think what you do is you just bring Brian back, and this is MLS. You can always make a different decision later, but I think he's actually done a pretty good job this year, all things considered. There are the issues with how he's handled Raul. There are issues with maybe how he's handled JP. You can say there's issues with how he handled Niko Ladero. You can kind of go through Leo Chu. You can kind of find players that he has that you can quibble with how he has handled the personalities. But I think as a whole cohesive unit, he's done a pretty good job of keeping this team together, especially at the start of the year where it felt like it was really on the precipice of completely falling apart.
So I'll play devil's advocate because I don't want anybody to think that I'm over here sitting with the drum, let's fire Brian Schmetzer, because that's not it. What I will say is that it is a good point of conversation because of a couple of things. You just mentioned a few of the ones that I was going to talk about. There's also the point that the same way we look at players and say, look, hey, Raul or Niko or whoever, Joseph Martinez, they're not the player of old. It can happen in the coaching level. And I feel like Brian Schmetzer has changed his way of coaching. And I've asked him before, and maybe you or Jetta have to ask him again, but it's the fact that he used to be a player's coach. Is what people used to say. Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
The best thing about Brian is a player's coach, and he's going to motivate me. He's going to do this and that and the other. If you are a follower of Thunder Heart, you've seen my article in which we talk about some of the issues that there have been in this locker room and some of the lack of morale and things that overall, and it's not just 1, 2, 3, 4 sources that I use for this. I mean, it was multiple. I'm not going to say how many, but it is something that has come up. So that's one thing. The other part that I feel like I've been holding on to is I like that Brian holds himself accountable for mistakes, like rotational, like substitutions. But you can't say that so many times without changing it. So there's been times early in the season where he's like, I should have rotated. I should have moved. I should have done this. I didn't. He just said it again against San Jose. So if you're not making those changes, then there is some room for me to say, well, maybe this roster could have done a little bit better. I mean, a couple of those points, and Seattle's third or second in the West, right?
I mean, those 2 points those are huge drop points that they had this.
And if we go back to the game in Houston, if we go back to a lot of games where there's been some questionable calls by Brian, then I would say, yes, maybe there's been room for something to have been done better. So that's why I bring up the conversation. Again, I'm not sitting here saying I'm not hashtag Brian out, nothing like that. All I'm saying is that there have been situations. Pedro de la Vega is another one. 3 or 4 times I heard Brian Schmetzer say, well, I feel like Pedro's doing too much. I feel like, he feels too much pressure. I just asked him on Monday. He's like, well, he's one of the players that I talked to. But is that the first time you talked to him? Because if this was a repetitive concept, and if this was something that you saw in the player, because he does have this huge pressure that he's been hindered by injuries and he needs to prove himself, then you need to do more to cultivate that relationship and to get this guy to play at his level and feel less pressure. And I don't know if there's enough of that he's done. So there is room for things to be better. And that's the only reason why having the conversation about what's next is the real thing. Because look, last time I heard, the Sounders are not the Mariners. So getting to the playoffs shouldn't be, nobody should be throwing a parade because the Sounders made it to the playoffs. So what is going to be the real parameter? How far you get in the playoffs. So that's all I want to say, is that there have been other coaches in other clubs around MLS that they consistently made it to the playoffs, but they couldn't make that breakthrough. And that's where you start thinking, is there something else out there?
Yeah, and I guess going to the roster management part of this, I think Brian deserves credit for the way he's used subs. He seems like he's been, especially over the last half of the season, been much more aggressive about when he subs.
I agree.
And how many subs he uses. But the one thing that he has been sort of stuck on, and I think he would probably even admit that his preference is to find a starting lineup and sort of stick with it. And we have definitely seen that down the stretch, where even in heavy weeks, there is a core of 8 to 9 players who he basically just decides, no, this is who needs to start. And he'll rotate some, but he has never aggressively rotated the lineup, even though his subbing pattern suggests there are probably 15 or 16 at least players on this roster who have a pretty high degree of faith, that he has faith in, that they can come in and do a job. And yet he's still reluctant to rotate the lineup more. I mean, just the fact that, I think it's pretty impressive that Jordan has played as much as he has, and that he's done it at a high level. I actually am very impressed. I think it's in some ways one of the things that Jordan has made the biggest step forward is in just the raw number of minutes that he's able to load on. At the same time, if you want Raul to be engaged, don't you got to give him some starts?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And he goes to game rhythm. He goes to confidence. he's publicly said it, and there, that's something that you need to listen to as a coach and say, hey, you know what? If might need to rely on Raul to close a game for me or do something, I have to work him into that rotation, and he really hasn't done that. I've heard similar things from Leo, and I know Leo has some issues of his own when it comes to effort, when it comes to a lot of things, but there is that sense of, has enough been done to develop Leo or hasn't it? So back to your point on the rotational component, I think that there's been more than enough chances this season to bring in certain players to just get them part of that group and to really get them engaged, like you said, for what's ahead, that last 4 games of the season and playoffs.
And this is going to be this week right now is probably the most important week of the whole season, because they have 3 games in 8 days. They're going to play Houston Dynamo at home, which is really, it's about as much of a literal must win as you can have.
100%.
If you have any hope of getting a home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs, you absolutely have to win this game. And then you have road games against the Vancouver Whitecaps and the Colorado Rapids, which are not necessarily must wins, but they are games you need to get points from if you have any hope of getting home field advantage. And then, of course, they have a season finale at home against the Portland Timbers, which almost best case scenario, that's going to have some play in seeding.
Some relevance, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to definitely be a relevant game. And it would be, it's not outside of the realm of possibility. I would say it's even likely that game will probably determine which one of those teams gets some home games.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Sarietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, and part of that, like you said, starts with Houston, and it's not just about the points, but you need to start having this team belief. Because look, I love what Sounder at Heart did with breaking it all down. I think that you guys said that the Sounders are 9-2-2 in their last 15 games, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right.
But when you look at it, and this is not anything the Sounders should care about, but it is a little benevolence from the calendar, because it's Chicago, it's New England, it's Austin, is a heavily diluted Columbus Crew without 6 players with a field player on goal.
Yeah, you can't escape that. The Sounders, it is what it is. You can say that their record is a result of their schedule, or you can say you can only play the teams that you're in front of. No matter how you slice it, the reality is the Sounders have not beaten any teams that are currently ahead of them in the playoff in the standings. They have a few wins over playoff teams. They deserve credit, and I should take that back. They haven't beaten any teams in MLS play who are anything close to full strength. So they beat the Crew, who are obviously a very good team. I don't think we need to talk about all the caveats that go into that one. They beat the Galaxy, but that was in Leagues Cup. And then the rest of their wins over playoff teams are teams like Minnesota and Portland, who are on the lower end of that are both actually in play-in positions.
And a Minnesota team that's very different right now than what they were, when the Sounders beat them. So this is why I think that having a good result against Houston, which won't be easy, I'll tell you right now that regardless of no Hector Herrera, this is a tough team to beat down. Ben Olsen's a guy that knows how to motivate his guys. That back line is hard to get through. That midfield with Coco Carrasquilla and Arthur, that's 2 veteran players that are going to come at you. And Obed and Josh, they're younger players. They're going to have to really bring it against this Houston team. So it's no easy way. Ponce is a very good striker that moves around, that does a lot of good things. They tend to push their fullbacks quite high. So there's going to be a lot of things that Seattle's going to have to figure out in order to get a good result. And therefore, they'll show you how ready are we to really make a push. Because again, making it to the playoffs is not the standard. It's how far you get in there.
And frankly, you have to be able to beat a team. Houston is good.
Yeah.
But if we are to believe that this team can do anything in the playoffs, beating the Houston Dynamo at home is basically like the
bare minimum.
The bare minimum that you can expect.
100%.
And especially in a game like this where you know the stakes, they're coming in rested.
Yep.
The Sounders don't have any excuses for this game. Hector Herrera is probably out.
No, yep.
The biggest change from the last time the Sounders played Houston, though, is Ponce. What can you tell us about him specifically?
Ponce is a very smart player in the last 18. He knows how to drag and play the field. He's not a poacher. He's a moving striker. He tends to move a lot. You will see him link up consistently and then find the back of defenders. So the movement there is what's going to be very different about this Houston team, because remember when the Sounders played this team, I forget who the forward was, but he wasn't even a forward. He was a midfielder playing that position.
You're right. It was
because
has like a Russian name.
Yeah, and he wasn't even part of it.
Right.
Ponce is a guy that's very differently and that's in very good form. So that just gives the Sounders a real threat in order to stop him. Now, the good thing for the Sounders is that their forte defensively is what holds them together. We could say it's the more consistent part, although they do tend to have their woes, just like they've had during the season. But yeah, Ponce is a player that's going to provide you with a lot of different looks and a lot like I'm not saying that he plays like a half nine or like a like a fake nine, none of that. But it's just his movement is very difficult to pattern.
Yeah, and the Sounders haven't played a lot of strikers like that this year. They've mostly played. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to think if there's other sort of like playmaking forwards that they've had to face. Not, I guess maybe
Bogut.
Well, I was gonna say Bogut, but even then, Kamara mostly I think started the games, and Bogut has been playing more of a traditional winger role when he's played the Sounders. So it'll be an interesting matchup. The Sounders should win this game. I think they should be favored. But like I said, this is a real test. This is we're gonna find out a lot, I think, about the Sounders this week.
Yeah,
this week extended, and it's gonna be. I don't know. I'm interested to see, because in some ways I think it's a really good thing for the Sounders to have to go through a situation like this to get to the playoffs, because I think it will do a very good job of setting expectations of where they should be. The Sounders are going to make the playoffs. They basically, if they win this game, they're in. If they win any more games this year, they're going to be in the playoffs. That's not really the question. They can get into the playoffs without winning a game this year.
Yeah, and I will see what happens. I mean, it seems like Raul still having some issues with his knees. They said that Leo Chu was ill. He had some stomach stuff. So we'll see exactly what the Seattle Sounders have to work with there. The good thing is that, of course, none of these players are
expected
starters right now. But they might need, and that's something I want to see. If, let's say, Jordan has a hard time against this back line, what's plan B? If there's no Raul, is it Danny Misowski, who's barely played? Is it just what is it? What is that?
Is it Georgie Monongu?
Is it Monongu?
Who's a relatively untested player still? Are we at the point where we're expecting Paul Rothrock to be a game changer like that? I mean, these are the big questions that the Sounders still have to ask or have to answer. I did want to talk to you about this because I feel like this has been an ongoing discussion point for the last couple of years. Is Jordan Morris is in the midst of his best season of his career.
Correct.
He's on 17 goals across all competitions. He's got 13 in MLS play, and he's starting to score goals that I think for a long time people have wondered, is he even capable of scoring? Like, I thought in a big way, the game against San Jose was. His performance specifically against San Jose was really encouraging, because both of those goals were the product of not great play, but him just being alert in the box and being a solid finisher. And these are the types of goals that a number 9 needs to score. And if you look at his run of form as a number 9, it's really quite remarkable. He's got 16 goals in his last 23 games. If you just go back to the games where he's been playing as a 9, he's basically got like 9 goals in, I think, in 14 games, something like that. He is, to me, showing that he might actually be the number 9 the Sounders have long sought. I know you've been sort of a skeptic of him, not necessarily as a player, but as a number 9. Are you starting to see changes that are impacting the way you see him, or are you still pretty convinced the Sounders need to go out and get a number 9 and move him out to the wing?
He's definitely done more to make me feel like there is a future where he can be a 9. And I don't even want to refer back to the goals, although I agree with you. The San Jose game, there's 2 things that a striker, a real 9, needs to do. Sometimes it's just hitting the ball out of instinct, without looking, without absolutely anything. Both of those goals might have been amazing. There were some deflections in there, but positioning yourself correctly and just pulling the trigger, those are things that he needs to do. So he did that. The best game I've seen him play at the 9 was the 3-2 win over Minnesota. And it wasn't just the goal early. It was his movement and the way that he was pivoting, which when you play a 4-2-3-1 is so important. And it's something that I've always felt like he had a hard time with, is playing with the goal to his back. And that's been bringing in the wingers. Absolutely. Doing a little bit more of a hold up play. And he did that game. His movement was very smart. The way he crashed the box that game was very good. So do I think that you could still get that exact same production out wide? Yeah, because I feel like there are times where he finds a lot of space and a lot of opportunities coming into that second post and coming in from wide play when he does push more back and forth. Because what I've seen the Sounders do recently as well is that whether it's Paul and Georgie or Pedro and Paul, they've inverted and there's a lot of movement. And at times he will push Jordan out wide a little bit and he just finds space. So can he still do that? Sure. Do I feel like moving forward a DP9 is where the team is going? Everything that I've seen and read and heard is that they are going to go out there and get a 9, but he's giving you something to think about. So credit to Jordan. I am seeing, back to your question, if I had to answer, yes, I've seen a lot of improvement, a lot of maturity, a lot of physical. That angry bearded Jordan is my favorite Jordan.
Dark Jordan.
Jordan is my favorite Jordan.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's what's interesting is I've heard the same things you have, which is that the Sounders have internally identify the number 9 as a position that they want to go and get, in part not necessarily as a way of saying they don't believe in Jordan, but just saying that they think he can be just as productive on the wing. But I would hope that what his play has done is opened the possibility that maybe we shouldn't be so focused on a number 9 and we should be more open-minded to, if we can go find a Denny Bwanga type or a Joseph Painsil or some kind of game.
A Gabriel Peck,
exactly. A player who can supplement Jordan that might be the best player, but can do it from the wing. And granted, that might be a harder thing to find. It might be a more expensive player to sign, is a sort of that type of winger. But I would hope that they would go into this offseason with that as their North Star, is finding the best possible, like just an attacker who can do multiple things, and we don't need to be so locked in to what position we're looking at. I don't know. Are you hearing anything different than what I've heard going into this offseason as far as what the budget might be? Because that seems to be the big question is, will this team actually spend money this offseason?
No. Me and you, I think, have similar information. I think that it's still in the realm of possibilities that in January there might not even be a big signing right off the bat, which I feel like that's crazy. I mean, people, I don't think fans can manage that. I mean, there might be a boycott. I mean,
I would hope the team understands that. I mean, I suppose it's possible that they'll put in their best effort and just not be able to sign someone. I guess you could sort of wrap your mind around accepting that. But I would hope that they know that getting a big signing done this winter has to be a priority.
Yeah. And I mean, to their point, I mean, it is kind of interesting who just walked by. It is interesting, the fact that I mean, to their credit, the guys that possibly would make the biggest impact don't open up until the summer.
That's the problem. That's the situation they put themselves in, right?
But I think I've heard you say this before, and I totally agree, is that sometimes you might have to pay a big transfer fee to get the guy you want, because once that door opens and it's a free transfer, then that's a lot of teams are going to jump on your guys. So
it's no secret that everyone would like to sign free transfers who otherwise would have to pay for their transfer.
Right. And look, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate from people, and this is where I feel for Craig, because I feel like Craig has, and this goes as well as Sean Henderson, who's brilliant. I think that they've identified over the last couple of seasons players that would make a difference for this team, but the budget hasn't been there. They were kind of sent out to fight a war with a very little budget, and it's hard. I think I told you this before. It's kind of like if you're shopping at, I can't say names of companies, but if you're shopping at,
don't worry, it's okay.
Okay. If I'm shopping at Walmart, or if I'm shopping at Goodwill, I'm going to get certain type of product, right?
You might get lucky.
You may be lucky. Maybe you find a collector's item at Goodwill that you had no idea, and you get it for $15, and you're like, man, this thing is worth hundreds. But the reality is that if you want good product, you go to the better stores. You go to Macy's, or you go whatever. But if you're going to shop at Goodwill, Nordstrom, you go to Nordstrom, right? You get your stuff. And not Nordstrom Rack. I'm talking about Nordstrom Rostrom,
exactly.
right? So that's kind of why I feel for Craig. And I think he's a very smart guy. And I think he's got some thick skin, because he knows he's under the gun. I've put him under the gun. You've put him under the gun. He hears it from fans. So I would like to see at least a transfer window where he's given a wallet and saying, hey, man, here's what you asked for. Go cook.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what we all want to see. And if it doesn't work out, then we can judge him on those signings. And I think that's all we really want, is we want to be able to look at moves they've actually made and judge those moves. And what I think is tough is that I think a lot of fans, and I don't blame fans for feeling this way.
No, of course not.
Is that they see the lack of moves as an indictment. And on some level, that's fair. But I think what we have to understand is that the lack of moves is a product of a strategy that goes beyond the front office.
Right.
That's about budget. That's about how like you give a budget to any GM, and they're going to spend it. If you think the GM has money that he's just hoarding,
right?
For what reason do you think they would be doing that? There's no good reason to do that. And I think that's all we're saying, is like we would just want to see this team with a real budget. And then if they go out and they make a bunch of bad signings, okay, fair enough. Then fire the GM.
Yeah, and like I get it, and I've been critical, and Craig knows that I've been critical of the Eber move and of Pedro move, regardless of the injuries, because it kind of falls on him regardless of. But the rest of the players, I mean, these are players that he got on the cheap, right? I mean, Bell, Moose. I mean, these are players that you got on the cheap, so that's what they're doing, is playing on the cheap.
Exactly. Danny Musovski at $350,000. That's what a $350,000
looks like. Yep.
Like that's
100%.
And sure, you can go look like, okay, so Kai Kamara is making less and being more productive. There's one Kai Kamara.
Yeah, 100%. Oh God, I love Kai Kamara. I just love Kai Kamara. That goal yesterday is so good.
Oh my God.
The way he just kind of just pounces into the 18.
And he's
so smart.
I don't think there's been no forward. At least maybe, I don't know. It would be interesting to compare Eddie Johnson's peak performance with Kai Kamara right now. But that Kai Kamara is doing this basically at age 40 is almost...
It's insane.
It's unbelievable.
It's insane. No, I think that the only real move I have a hard time with, and I've told him this directly, is the Nathan move. I mean, 500 for that player. I mean,
it's tough right now. And I would imagine he's not going to be back. And that's the one saving grace, is that he was only on a 1-year guaranteed deal. He's on an option for next year. I would be very surprised if I guess there's a world where he might be back. There's no world where he's back on his option number.
Right. No, 100%.
Unless for some reason his option is less than it is now.
No.
How these things work.
No, absolutely not. No, I think he'll be gone. So when it comes to the build of the roster, I mean, there is some things that Craig could have done better, but at the end of the day, he's just been working with a specific budget, and that's what he's done.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Well, this has been great having you on, Niko. We're trying to do this more often. It was nice. The Sounders actually let us use some space at Longacres today, so I guess we should disclose that we're in the Sounders offices here.
No, and I appreciate that from
them. It was
them.
very eerie that Adrian walked by as we were talking about budget.
Yeah.
I think it's soundproof.
Yeah,
I hope it's soundproof.
So. I don't
find
know.
out there's a speaker in here.
Maybe there's a mic. I'm looking for cameras. There's nothing in here. But you know what? The best thing about I think what me and you do is that we would never say anything here or write about anything that would face. Absolutely. That's people tell me that all the time. Oh, when you no, man, that's what I say. I'll tell them to their face. That's just the way it is. Yeah. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it because that's who they are. So and
I think one of the realities, and not to get too into how the sausage gets made, but one of the realities that I think both of you and I are both very aware of is that anything we're willing to say in print or on the podcast, we have to be willing to hear feedback from.
Yep.
We have, and I guess you can argue that makes us pull punches sometimes. I don't think we're pulling punches. I just think we are interacting with these people like they're people, because we have to continue to interact with them, and we're going to be critical when it deserves to be critical. We're going to hype them up when they deserve to be hyped. We have our biases. We want this. I think both of us want this team to do 100%. Well, and that's I
don't hide it.
Right, and that's what this is about, right? This is part of why I love working with you, Niko, is that you tell it how it is, and I
always will, man. The show I do in Spanish, there's a guy that's like a purist journalist, and he says he doesn't have any affiliation bias. Sure. I don't like any team. I don't even like Colombia. When I watch a Colombia game, I just watch a soccer game, and you got the passport. Look, man, I don't hide it, man. I get hyped. I tweet about it. That's just who I am. I like the Sounders. Absolutely. I've been watching them, following them for 12 years or so. Of course, I'm going to have some bias to it. It's just who I am. So it's no big deal.
Nature.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. So it's all about, I do want fans to know that a lot of times criticism doesn't need to be rude, and it doesn't need to be, I don't need to get in Brian's face or Stephen Fry's face to be critical. There's tactfulness, there's a way to do it, and it doesn't take anything away. They understand the questions we're asking, they're answering them. Now, if they don't answer the answer that you want, we can do nothing about that.
Right.
That's just the way
words in their mouths.
No, I would love Brian to answer sometimes some of the things I ask him, but that's just the way he's going to be with me. So we'll move on. I'll ask it again. He might not answer again, but that's all we can do is ask the right questions, and
they never take it personally.
No, they don't. Absolutely not. I play around with Brian, I'm not his favorite, but at the same time, there's a mutual respect.
No, I think today was a good example of him sort of joking about being upset with you, joking with you, about
sure, absolutely,
and engaging with you. He's not ignoring you.
Nope, 100%.
Anyway, we're maybe getting a little off topic here.
Yeah, we did.
Niko, where can people find you? I always like to remind people where people can find you.
Absolutely. So on Twitter and at El Rolo NW. Yes, that is like the candy. El Rolo NW. And it has nothing to do with the candy. On Thursdays, 7:30 to 8 or 8:15, I do AM in the morning here Pacific. I want you guys to check out Soccer Down Here is a show out of Atlanta. We break down Sounders, all Western Conference, and we get into the juice boxes for those of you that like to put a little money on MLS in general. We break that down, by the way. Seattle is minus 130 and Houston is a plus 340. So if you think Houston might have a chance, and that kind of tells you that they're heavy underdogs, the Houston Dynamo coming into Lumen. So we have that going on. And of course, anything that I do right in English is going to be at Sounder Heart. And then in Spanish, anything at all. And then on... for just Spanish speakers out there, if there are any here, Mondays and Thursdays, Soccer Bar in our YouTube channel, both Soccer Bar and Pulso Sports YouTube channel. Sorry about that. That was long.
What are you talking about? That was perfect. Well, Niko, thank you so much for doing this. I want to remind everyone, this is an episode of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. It's part of Nos Arietes. I wanted to do this episode sort of as a reminder that we have this private RSS feed that's available to subscribers. We are going to eventually make this available to all of our listeners as well. But I want to remind everyone that the reason this is possible is because we have gone to a reader, listener supported model. Our memberships start as low as $25. And at the $75 level, you can get into our Discord, which is honestly a lot of fun. Niko sometimes comes in there. We give him a hard time. And it's just a good community building space. And if you already are a supporter, and you probably are if you're listening to this, I just want to say thank you. This has been an amazing thing. We're now well into our first year, or starting our second year, and we are very much on pace to continue growing, which is great that everyone has been supporting us the way that they have been. So I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Niko for joining me today. I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for No Sarietes. Remember, you'll never be out alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.